If you try to do a wheelie, it immediately just cuts power on you. My ears are telling me that I've got a triple and I can wring this thing out, but my eyes are telling me that I'm about to run out of revs here. This thing is really, really good. Dang, that's a good looking bike. Like, there's just no way. I'm looking at my reflection right here in the back of this pickup truck, and alrighty everybody, this might be one of the most hyped bikes I've ever featured on the channel. Probably one of the most anticipated motorcycles in the last 5 or 6 years. Triumph has released a entry-level-ish motorcycle, a 650cc naked bike competitor, coming for the throat of the MT-07, your SV650s, bring your CB650Rs. This is Triumph's Trident 660. And what a handsome little motorcycle this is, isn't it? Look at this thing. I think Triumph absolutely nailed it in terms of the look and appearance of this bike. I think they did a great job. They've done something here that most people can be proud to own. The lines here are kind of neo-retro, kind of modern, but just pure sport bike, and I think it looks all the better for it. So, this is our giveaway Triumph Trident 660, as you guys know. If you hit the link down below to yammie.co, you can find out how to get entered to win this motorcycle as part of our beginner bike giveaway series. And this time around, we're doing something a little bit different. We have a second place prize in the form of a $6,000 cash prize giveaway so that you can go get whatever motorcycle that you want if you don't win this Triumph Trident. So the Triumph Trident is our first place grand prize, and our second place prize is a $6,000 cash prize giveaway, and we are featuring a WR250 as another beginner bike in our collection for this series as well. So hit the link down below to yammie.co, find out how you can get entered to win this Triumph Trident. Go to yammie.merch.com, get yourself a hat, a t-shirt, whatever you want, and you can get entered to win that way too. So let's talk about this bike a little bit before we get it out on the road today. We're going to be doing a comprehensive first ride on this thing. So we're going to take it to twisties, take it out to the city, take it out to suburbs, just ride it the whole day, see how it feels, and see what it's all about. But let's talk through what this motorcycle is supposed to be. Now, as many of you know, this is powered by a 660cc 3-cylinder engine that is derived on the original Street Triple 765 engine, the original Daytona 765 engine. And so many of you are now saying, well, damn, Yammie, that's awesome. Probably makes a buttload of power, right? Well, no. This actually makes about 80 horsepower at the crank and about 45 foot-pounds of torque, if I remember correctly. Red lines at about 9,500 to 10,000 RPM, and you cannot simply just ECU flash this and get it to be a Street Triple, get it to be a Daytona. This engine has a completely different architecture to it as opposed to those motorcycles. So if you want a fast 3-cylinder motorcycle, you can get yourself a Daytona, get yourself a Street Triple. This is not one of them. However, that doesn't mean this thing isn't punchy. This is every bit as capable and as quick as something like an MT-07, a CB650R, an SV650, so it's plenty punchy and fast. Where this motorcycle differs, however, is the specification, the fit and finish, and some of the other features that it has that just kind of punches way out of its competition and kind of sets itself as the class leader, in my opinion. Triumph really did their homework when it came to this motorcycle, and I think they knocked it out of the park, but I don't think this motorcycle is perfect. I'm going to get into a couple things I don't like about it later in this video. But let's talk a little bit more about the specification. So as you can see, the front forks on this motorcycle are provided by Showa, upside down, non-adjustable, probably class leading. It feels like the CB650R's fork, so that's pretty good. You got these Nissan brakes up front, not the biggest, not radially mounted, nothing fancy here. They get the job done. I have a lot to say about the brakes, and we're getting into that as well. As you can tell, they're not anything huge like a Brembo Stylema. These are pretty bare bones brakes on this motorcycle. However, one thing I love on this bike are the stock tires that it comes with. It comes with these pretty high specification Michelin Pilot Road 5s, which is a great all-around tire, great sport touring tire. something that you can buy this motorcycle and then keep for a good 8 to 10,000 miles without having to change out the tires on your bike. Many other 650 class bikes come with these garbage Dunlop OEM tires that you should just swap out immediately. Not this motorcycle. And that's kind of the theme of the Triumph Trident overall. It's a bike that Triumph wants to sell to you and that you can then buy and then use and own and not have to really worry about or think about very much either. Looking over here in the rear tail section, you can tell that they've gone with the tire hugger system as opposed to a big whale tail, and that's allowed for a really clean and tidy rear end right here. Triumph's packaging and fit and finish has just, it's a cut above the rest in my opinion. When you look at a Japanese bike versus a Triumph, the Triumph always just has a little bit nicer fit and finish. As you can tell, this gas tank has this really beautiful Trident little plastic logo embossed into it, cut into the shape of the tank here, and it's just kind of a nice thing. The other big thing that this bike has are rider modes and a little bit more advanced features and technologies at the front here. So as we flip the switch here, you can see that there is a cool LCD system here for your revs, your mileage, which is perfect. You can see your revs, you can see your mileage, and you can see your speedo perfectly right here. And then you have this tiny little readout screen right here that's actually very legible and easy to use. This doesn't have the Triumph joystick system, which I think is all the better for it. I don't like the joystick system very much on the other Triumphs, but you can cycle through here. You can see your real-time MPGs, coolant temperatures, service intervals. You can also go into the main menu here, set up your bike. You have very simple traction control on this, which you can disable very easily, which is great. You also have rain and riding modes as well. So if you've got in road mode right now, you can toggle it over to rain mode. One moment here. Don't know why it's not letting me. Perhaps it has to be turned on. Maybe that's the Triumph telling me, saying, all right, mate, turn me on. Turn on this motorcycle. So you'll hear as we flip the switch here, this bike comes to life, the 3-cylinder note, very unique for this motorcycle in the class, the 650 class, the only 3-cylinder bike. Let's take a listen. Those of you who are Triumph aficionados, that will be a very familiar sound, and I could actually point out all the little Daytona parts here and there on this bike, but I will not. I will spare you guys a little bit. And so now as we flick the wick here, that is awesome. What's even more awesome about this bike is the price point. Triumph will sell you this bare bones as it is right here, no optional quick shifter, none of that stuff. They'll sell you this bike for $8,000, $7,995 if I remember correctly. That's a lot of bike for the money, and I'm going to talk about why I think for that reason alone it's the class leader. But again, not a perfect motorcycle, and we're going to get into that as well today. So what do you guys say we take off with this motorcycle? Enough jibber jabber, and let's start talking about it, shall we? Let's go. Let's get it in my mileage here because I like that feature. Good mirrors on the Trident as well. Let's go. Nice punchy little engine. It appears that the British gods of motorcycling have given me British weather for my Triumph test ride today. I say test ride, but it's really a first ride because, again, I bought this bike as a giveaway bike. This is not a demo bike. It's not a loaner bike. Nothing like that. We have purchased this motorcycle. I have purchased this motorcycle, I should say. Cut the money out of my own checking account to get this bike as a giveaway bike. So taking off with the Triumph here, the first thing I feel compared to other 650 motorcycles is how compliant this bike is. Between the Michelin Pilot Road 5s that it comes with Quickfoot standard, the Showa front suspension, the overall geometry and shape of this bike, it's super compliant, super easy to maneuver around corners, and Triumph's probably done that because they know that a lot of folks who are buying this motorcycle as a entry-level rider, maybe as a second bike, they want it to be easy to ride. And I called it whenever this bike came out. I was like, Triumph is not going to sell a motorcycle that handles poorly, and this bike does not handle poorly. And when we talk about a motorcycle's handling, the important thing to note is it's not just front-end suspension components. I think a lot of people see, oh, this bike has Öhlins, that means it's going to handle amazing. The handling on a motorcycle is so much more about the overall design, the wheelbase, the rake, the trail, the position of the engine in the frame, and then at the end of it to handle undulations and bumps. Yeah, you want nice top-end components, but they're not that important, honestly. They are very important. You want very tunable, adjustable suspension at the very least, but the overall design of a motorcycle informs so much more of the handling of the bike rather than just the suspension components itself. So the overall package here is really good. This bike flicks really easily from side to side. It's really sure-footed. And again, one thing that I didn't expect with it is how compliant it is over bumps. It's a really comfortable ride. The seat is really squishy and nice. It like floats over bumps really easily. And when you have suspension that is non-adjustable, that's really what you want to see. You want to see a bike that is dealing with suspension and dealing with bumps in a very supple kind of way. This is a great place to sit as well. Compared to something like an MT-07, compared to an SV650, this feels like it's in a whole other spaceship universe kind of way. I've got this amazing looking dash in front of me, this nice TFT. I've got rain and ride mode. I've got traction control. These are really nice features to put on a bike that only cost $8,000. That's pretty special, I gotta say. Now, as I come to a stop here, not exactly a stop, but just slowing the motorcycle down to negotiate this corner here, one thing becomes very clear to me is that the Triumph Trident, and this should come as no surprise to you guys if you're familiar with the 650 class, this is not a bike that's designed to be anything like the Street Triple. For those of you out there thinking that this motorcycle is going to be as razor sharp and as sporty as a Street Triple, do not think that about this bike. It is something else totally different. It's designed to be a 650cc bike. It's much more upright than a Street Triple. It's much more of a street bike than a Street Triple, despite the Street Triple being called a Street Triple, which is a bit odd. It should be called a Race Triple. It's designed to go to the track more than anything else. This motorcycle sits super comfortably, man. I'm really upright on it, which I didn't expect. I expected the Triumph Trident to be a little bit more pitched over, but it's actually not at all. They've designed the bars in a way that it's actually pretty upright. I've got basically no bend in my back. I can ride this thing perfectly upright, and the gas tank shape tells you a lot of what they want you to do with this bike, right? You don't have a big, wide, flat tank where you can tuck in and get after it, you know? What you've got is a very competent street package that is a premium 650cc option at a pretty budget price. Again, $8,000 for this motorcycle is a lot of bike for the money. Now, I've been pretty effusive towards the Triumph Trident, and I told you guys there's some things I don't like about it, so let me just go ahead and tell you that right now. As I was mentioning about the brakes on this bike, I really don't like the front brakes on this bike. They don't feel that great. I feel like the CB650R's brakes and the SV650's front brakes are better than this bike's. I'm a little disappointed with the front brake feel on this bike. Sure, that's something you could probably solve with stainless steel lines, upgraded pads, different fluids, kind of getting in there and kind of fine-tuning the braking system a little bit, but you know, I really wish they hadn't cut corners on that one aspect of this motorcycle. It's not a great thing to do in my opinion. The front brake system is just a little bit poor on this motorcycle. I just don't get a whole lot of feel through the lever. I don't feel like I have a ton of stopping power. I was testing it earlier before I started my little first ride on this thing, and it's just, you know, it's fine. It'll stop the motorcycle. I don't want you guys to think that it's dangerous or something like that, but to a more experienced hand and a more experienced rider, this braking system leaves a little bit to be desired. Now, as you guys can tell, I'm taking it super easy because it is damp. This is a new motorcycle on new tires. There's really no reason to push the bejesus out of the Triumph Trident here on the street as we're just poodling around and learning more about it, right? We're learning about this bike. Now, one thing I want to show you guys here is this bike does have traction control, so if you try to do a wheelie, it immediately just cuts power on you. So if you want to have some fun with your Triumph Trident, you have to go into the menu, disable traction control, and that will allow you to get front wheel lift. But if you're an entry-level rider, don't worry about that. You're probably not going to be pulling wheelies. But it's just something to keep you maybe second bike owners mindful of, is that you cannot just jump on this bike and do clutch ups and expect it to do what you want to do. Now that brings me to the second thing I don't really love about this motorcycle is the throttle feel. And that's a really unfortunate thing because Triumph, in my opinion, is known for having some of the most buttery smooth, delicious throttle feels out of the entire motorcycle industry. It's one of the reasons why I adore my 675R race bike. I just feel like the fueling and the throttle feel is just absolutely sublime on those motorcycles. The Street Triple is amazing. The Tiger 900 has great feel. And so I was expecting to jump on this and be like, oh yeah, this is going to have that classic Triumph throttle feel. However, they've done something different here, and they've done something in the wrong direction, in my opinion, in the sense of making this a more friendly beginner bike. What they've done is they've really muted the throttle. This is a completely ride-by-wire system. There's no cables actually controlling the throttle opening and the throttle tube here, and so you have just a computer telling inputs. So you'll now tell me, oh, well, Yammie, you can just flash it, you can just change the parameters, but that's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of energy, and this is a brand new bike, and people are probably not able to crack the ECU and put a one-to-one throttle mapping on this. It's probably not the easiest thing to do in the world. So what do I mean by that? I mean that I'll actually show you guys here. We'll pull up here to the stop, and I'll show you what I'm talking about with this slightly delayed throttle that this bike has. Now we're in neutral here. I want you to watch for the RPMs versus this throttle here. Watch my hand and watch the display here. There's a latency. This is not one-to-one. And also, like, if I gently move this throttle, this is doing nothing. So there's quite a bit of what is it, guardrails or bumper barriers, like in bowling or something, to prevent you from really getting on this bike and getting after it. There's just a little bit of it's not exactly there for me. So I'm a little disappointed in the throttle feel. I feel like the MT-07 actually has a more crisp and direct throttle, but that's just because it's a bit of an older bike. However, this is the part of the section of the vlogs that we usually test acceleration, so why don't I show you guys how the Triumph gets on, shall we? What's interesting about the acceleration on this bike is that despite it's a triple, despite it being about 80 horsepower or so, it pulls and feels so much like the MT-07. They've tuned this triple to be very much like a twin. It produces a good amount of punch and torque, but it doesn't rev out the same way other triples that I've experienced do. And again, it's not making the peak power of those other triples, so obviously it's not going to do that, but it is surprising whenever I jump on this thing, being that I do track and race a 675R. My ears are telling me that I've got a triple and I can ring this thing out, but my eyes are telling me that I'm about to run out of revs here at about 9,500 RPM. So it's kind of funny. However, this bike is not designed for top-end crazy pulls like that. It's designed for the mid-range punch. That's what triples are best known for. They're designed for that good, creamy, linear power delivery, and that's what this thing does really well. As we cruise here in fourth gear, 50 miles per hour, you can lay into the throttle. It's a really nice surge of power, very similar to any other 650 class bike. Again, not going to be like the Street Triple. It's not going to light your hair on fire. This is a supple, street-oriented bike, and I kind of think it's all the better for it. A lot of people are comparing this bike to the first generation Street Triple, but I feel like that's kind of wrong, mostly because this motorcycle was designed with a very street-oriented and very budget-conscious rider in mind, whereas the first Street Triple was really more of a fun, naked bike that was designed to be quite sporty. This isn't really like that. This is designed to be a nice, easygoing street motorcycle that you can be very proud to own. I think there's such a pride of ownership when it comes to Triumphs, and they have just such a great look about them, and they're a little bit different than your Japanese bikes, and I think that's what makes them really special and cool. That's why I like my Triumph anyways. Now, this bike is really going to blow a hole through the 650 class. We have gotten so many comments and questions about the Triumph Trident since it came out. So many people were interested in this motorcycle. It was so hard to even get this bike. I actually bought it from Eurocycle. I put the pre-order in like 5 or 6 months ago, and I just now got it. you basically can't find these. They're in super high demand. And that's for good reason, because this bike slots in beautifully between something like an MT-07 and a CB650R at the price of an MT-07. So it's like, well, what do you have to lose, you know? Do you really have anything to lose? This is such a great motorcycle. And the handling on this compared to an MT-07 is just night and day. Despite the throttle being a little delayed and it's not exactly direct like I normally enjoy on my motorcycles, you know, the side to side on this bike between an MT-07 is like, there's no comparison whatsoever. This bike feels tremendous on the side of the tire. And again, as I mentioned, that's not just due to the fact that it has a Showa front fork. It's the fact that this motorcycle is a brand new bike. This is a new frame. This is not a frame that Triumph has made before, and they've taken years and years and years of experience of building the Daytonas, the Street Triples, the Tigers, all these great handling bikes into this new motorcycle. So because this is a latest iteration of all that built-in knowledge and engineering, it's gonna be pretty freaking good. And it is really good in that sense. I really enjoy hustling this bike around twisty turns, but I'm more impressed that this bike handles itself so nicely just going down the road. I didn't really expect this bike to be so supple and nice. It's butter smooth going down the road here. It's handling all the undulations so confidently, and with these Pilot Road 5s and this nice seat, I feel like I want to put a windscreen on this thing and just go do like 100 miles or 200 miles in a row at it and just have fun with it and go explore. And that's a great thing for beginner riders. I think beginner riders are looking for a bike they can just jump in the saddle and go do 100 miles in a day, 200 miles in a day, and just go have a good time on their motorcycle. But that's going to conclude our twisty road section with the Triumph Trident. Why don't we get it out to perhaps a suburb or a city, and let's see how this thing handles itself and talk a little bit more about this motorcycle. Alrighty, everybody, merging onto the highway here with the Triumph Trident 660, and I am very impressed with this motorcycle at highway speeds, which we are currently not doing. We're doing about 40 miles per hour, so let's pick up the wick here a little bit. Click up to 6th here. I'm very, very impressed with this bike at highway speeds. Normally, 650 class bikes in the Japanese mold, they tend to kind of fall apart a little bit. They start to get a little kind of rickety at above like 80, 90 miles per hour. I'm really impressed with how rock solid the Triumph feels. That same feeling I was telling you guys that it gives me over bumps and stuff of how supple and composed this motorcycle is. Same thing at highway speeds. It's very supple, very composed, very nice to ride. I gotta say, I'm very, very impressed. And the other thing I like about it too is, despite the fueling not being as Triumph quality as I've come to expect, the transmission and the clutch feel great. You still get that nice snickety kind of Triumph gear selection that I've come to know and love. The Street Triple has a fantastic pull on that. But one thing that is kind of weird is neutral is a little hard to find unless you pull the lever all the way in. That might just be a clutch adjustment that you have to do, but I found that for neutral, you have to pull the clutch all the way in. Not a huge deal. All you got to do is just to remember to do that when you're at a stop, but otherwise, pretty solid clutch feel and transmission feel on this bike. You've got plenty of passing power. I know that a lot of American riders worry about passing power. This motorcycle has 80 horsepower and a 660cc triple. It can definitely pass whatever you need to pass, and it can definitely cut in between highway traffic. You're not going to have any issues whatsoever with this motorcycle at highway speeds. I really like the passing power on this bike too, that sort of 60 to 80 range when you're trying to get around somebody. As I'll demonstrate to you guys here, we got traffic clearing up behind me a little bit. I'll go over here in the left lane, wake it up in 6th gear. I don't even need to change a gear. I'm already doing 70 miles per hour. Don't even need to downshift. That's one of the benefits of having a triple cylinder engine. Turn off my indicator here, get on the gas, and there's 80. Boom. No, not even need to downshift, which is awesome. And we're sitting right at about 5,000 RPM, 5,500 RPMs at 70 miles per hour, which is awesome. This motorcycle doesn't feel like it's revving too high or anything like that, so it's not geared super aggressively, which is nice. We're cruising at a pretty solid spot in the mid-range of the RPM, which is what I like to see when I'm cruising at highway speeds on my motorcycles. But yeah, really nice impression of the highway on the Triumph 660. Again, I really think this bike should have a windscreen because it's such a competent sport touring kind of bike. Maybe that's why they put Pilot Road 5s on it, because they knew that that's what people would want to do with it, and that's kind of what this bike is all about. It's really good for that, which is sweet. But what do you guys say if we get this thing out in the urban environment and talk a little bit more about the engine and maybe the ergonomics and how it works in more tight-knit corners, shall we? Alrighty, everybody, bopping around the urban center here in Austin, Texas with the Triumph Trident 660, and there's a couple things I wanted to talk about while we're cruising around here in the urban setting. Number one is, don't you even worry about if this motorcycle is good for urban duty or not, because it is so upright and comfortable. This is an awesome commuter and daily kind of bike. I just want to put that out there pretty much immediately so you guys know. The second thing I want to talk about was competitors to this bike, because the more time I spend on it, the more that I can barely believe that this motorcycle is only $8,000 on the showroom floor. This absolutely wipes the floor with the build quality of an SV650 or an MT-07. It feels so much more premium and cool to sit on. I think the Ninja 650 and the new Z650 are coming somewhat close because of how their new TFT dashes and all that, but man, compared to the engine, I mean, this triple has so much more flavor and character and is so much more punchy than that 650 and the Z650. I mean, this thing makes 15 more horsepower and it costs basically the same, maybe a little bit more on the showroom floor, something like that. And then you have the CB650R, which was often seen as the more premium option. I think Honda sells that for $92.99, and yeah, it's got a 4-cylinder engine, but that's basically all it has. This motorcycle right here, I mean, it's got the Showa front suspension, it's got the punchy engine, it looks awesome, and it costs a lot less. So I think that's why I've been kind of saying this bike is going to be the new king of the 650 class. This thing is really good. Triumph really nailed it with this bike, and I gotta say, I've been really enjoying my time with it, and there definitely is a sense of pride of ownership of it. Like, as I'm rolling through town here, I like seeing my single round headlight. It's a very, people-pleasing kind of bike. You can't really say that this is a ugly motorcycle or a bad motorcycle. I think most people would look at this and just think, dang, that's a good looking bike. Like, there's just no way. I'm looking at my reflection right here in the back of this pickup truck, and this is a great looking ride that anyone could be proud to own and use as their only motorcycle. Probably not as a first bike, it's not that beginner appropriate, but as a second motorcycle, feels awesome. That's really good too. But let's talk a little bit more about this engine. So, as I mentioned, this has the same base of a first generation 675 triple. So you're starting from a good platform there, but this engine is completely different than a street triple engine, as I mentioned. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have a good amount of punch and grunt too. This thing low down in the revs punches just as hard as an MT-07, just as hard as an SV650. I think it punches a little bit harder than a CB650 because of the triple and because of the increase in torque as well and the bump and displacement. This thing is definitely one of the punchiest bikes in the class, and it's hard to deny the appeal of a triple, especially in a motorcycle that's not designed for top-end power. Squeeze the throttle in second. This is a rapid little bike. It's not slow by any means. And that's probably why they dialed in the throttle the way that they did, because it's just not really, I can imagine a beginner getting really out of sorts with this thing. And that does beg the question, is this a beginner bike? Well, I think yes. I mean, we put it in the beginner bike category. I think that with a judicious throttle hand, someone who's a little bit older, definitely not an 18-year-old kid, you could definitely have some fun with this bike as your first motorcycle. Use and respect it. The throttle's dialed in such a way that you're not going to be zapping yourself out of corners with it. It's pretty mellow. It can be more aggressive if you want it to. If you get on the throttle in second gear, it'll pick up and go. But again, it really runs out of breath towards the top, just like any other 650, which is really interesting. You wouldn't expect that out of this motorcycle, but it really does. One thing I wanted to show you guys too here is we're here in downtown. I specifically chose this road because I know that it has some more undulations and bumps and stuff and cracks in the road. And I just, man, the Trident is such a sure-footed bike. It feels so good going over bumps, more so than it has any right to, honestly. Yeah, this is a world of difference over an MT-07 in terms of the suspension. Really nice. Really great. And I love these tires too that comes equipped with the stock. I'm pretty sure this has 10,000 miles for the first service as well, so you don't have to worry about you know, the valves or anything like that, or any major service for quite some time when you pick up this bike brand new, which is a great thing. I think a lot of folks want to get a motorcycle and they just want to ride it. They don't want to worry about the service intervals and all that kind of stuff, you know. So that's pretty cool. As I mentioned, this makes a very capable in the city kind of bike. Really nice and upright ergonomics, really punchy engine, can get you out of trouble if you need to, can zip you through traffic pretty easily. Very nice bike, and the ergonomics and fit here are really cool too. These bars are just about perfect. The Z650 bars, for example, from the factory are more like here. They're much tighter and much smaller. And the MT-07, actually, the new one, has a wider bar as well. I think manufacturers are realizing that most consumers, most riders, want a bar that's a little bit wider, a little bit more commanding on their street naked motorcycle. So hats off to Triumph for doing that right on the first go around. But again, you can just tell they really did their homework on this bike. They studied all the big 650 bikes. I bet you their benchmarks were an MT-07 and a CB650R. I bet you anything those are the two benchmarks for this bike, because this literally feels like a blend of those two motorcycles. Yeah, this is going to be a fantastic bike to keep around in the shop. Overall, I would rate this thing a solid 8.5 out of 10 right now. This is a really, really good motorcycle, and I think it really fit their design brief really, really well. It's hard to make the case for any other 650 versus this one. This is a fantastic motorcycle, and it looks really good too. It's really difficult for me to say, no, you should get a Z650. You should not get a Z650 over this. No, you should get an MT-07 over this. Well, maybe if you want something a little bit more raw and peppy. There's like, oh, you should get a CB650R over this. No, the CB is way too expensive for what it is. This is definitely number 1 or number 2 for the 650 class, in my opinion. I think it only struggles and kind of sucks in terms of its front brake feel. Really not very good, in my opinion. I've changed the position on the lever here to see if I can get a little bit more leverage on that lever right here, but it doesn't seem to be really helping me at all. So this is not the best front brake feel, and the throttle's a little bit muted. But beyond that, the feature set on this thing is fantastic. The dash is cool. It looks great. The price is right. It handles phenomenally for a 650 class bike. Comes equipped with a great set of tires. This bike is a smash hit. I think it's a fantastic motorcycle. And I think that's going to wrap up our first ride of it today. We're going to be making tons more content with this bike because, as I mentioned, this is one of our giveaway motorcycles. We're going to have this thing in the Yammie Noob shop for a good 4 months. We're going to make a ton of content around it. Don't miss out. Stay up to date with us. Hit subscribe. Go to yammynoob.co. Find out how you can get entered to win this Triumph Trident and our $6,000 second place cash prize. And be sure to check out our WR250R feature videos we're going to make as well. So we'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. See you later.
You've made it to the end of a Yammie Noob video. Did you like what you saw? Do you want to see more of it? Check it out, right here, just like magic, waiting for you. Click this little square right here. More memes, more Yammie, more of my face. Isn't that great?